welcome. Thank you so much, Miguel, and all your wonderful people to pull together the 6th annual Soil Not Oil. I want to also give a thank you to the Ohlone people who have left us a multi-generational legacy, this land. And I also want to kind of weep with the wet Sunwit fight in West Canada that Bunker brought to our attention, since that is also going to have to be part of our modalities. So we're going to talk about where we are as far as, a species, what tools we have, how we can look for not only hope, but some great action that our other community members have undertaken. And then Paul will speak about, Paul Roger, one of the panel members, will speak about Agroecological Commons and evolving co-ops and collaboratives. And Seth Wilson will talk about municipalities aligning with urban farmers and broadening ownership, moving us from the farmers feed the world industrial paradigm to we feed each other together. And so on that note, Paul, if you would be good enough to share the slides so I know where I am, that would be great. So basically, there are some tools that we have developed as a species. One of them is the Stockholm overshoot slide, which tells us, as one of our partners yesterday explained about it, that was the gentleman from Costa Rica also used that slide. And also there's what's called overshoot, which is a product of global footprint. And just 1 week from today, we hit the overshoot from being into using 1.5 Earths worth of regenerative capacity, 1.5. So not only do we have to, cut back to 1 Earth, and I don't think there's any question that regenerative agriculture will help us do that, but also that we have the opportunity to work together. Okay, so these other several slides, we need to look at ourselves. This is us. This is what we're doing. We're overshooting. Food systems are a global driver. And we have to look in the mirror and care for the people who are thoughtful enough to give us these tools so we collectively can have a conversation together, to be of service, to be the people that we've been waiting for. We're the ones that are being given this challenge that the coronavirus has given us, to become regenerative as a people and as a part of the landscape, which was so eloquently presented by Jonathan Kabat with the Hotlum Eco Restoration Camp early this morning. And so food systems are a global driver. We have, for years and years and years, in the economic sector, there was no space for money for food. And I think that at this time, it's totally incredible that food has to be elevated, and all of the ways to use regenerative agriculture to become part of our ecosystem again, not only through food, but through the wild. And remember that we are a spiritual being connected to all of Gaia. And we have to remember to resonate with that. In the slide, Paul, where there's the mention of the forest restoration, There's also the pandemic illustrations about that I wanted to mention briefly, that there's this zootopic spillage. In other words, that was mentioned also today by Miguel Altieri, where basically a child was playing next to a dead tree in rural Africa, probably bitten by a bat, got the first Ebola, and then it went from there. So then the host pathogen, whatever it is, be it Ebola or COVID-19, has to root in something. There has to be a way that it can take over that organism, that body, and then pass it on to another. And so we need to pay attention to the incredible richness of our species, all of the species, even the ones on the edge of becoming extinct, you know, because they're the ones that we have to care for co-equally to ourselves, because, you know, we don't want them to get the pathogen, particularly if it's possible that there can be this spillage into the human species or any other species for that matter. So that's an issue. Now the forest, the deforestation issue is the driver of that pathogen vulnerability, because we don't have the totemic infrastructure, health infrastructure in our forests. And but this next slide, I think it's number 8 now, the Zonomic Spillover I spoke about that Miguel mentioned. And then there's the business of the natural recovery of the forest. A natural recovery of the forest, if left alone and not further logged or whatever it was undergoing, will take 60 years to recover. But this group in Southeast Asia, and I'm certainly happy to link you to the website, has been actively restoring forests, and they discovered that an actively restored forest will restore in 40 years instead of 60. And that's really phenomenal. So another issue about population matters, which is my slide number 9. Tom Goldtooth mentioned something that's been very, very sad. And that is that the Native women are being stolen and disappeared and abused because the patriarchy is afraid of the power of women and afraid of them being co-equal. But there's nothing to be afraid about. Women, by definition, are community builders. And at this particular point, we need to have a big push, and there is a big push in the political system, at least in this country, that women are being elevated to high offices. Of course, Iceland has had women president for years and years, but and there's Norway has a prime minister who's a very young woman. So from these kind of systemic interrelationships that I've been mentioning, there's the business of Sweden taking on what they call is the circular economy. They are taking on, as a nation, absolutely all of the egregious impacts that the capitalistic system has spread like warm peanut butter on a grate so it could drip through. And if you want to, you know, check up what they're doing, folks who are in policy, do that. That would be great. Also, I found something fascinating. And since my colleague Seth is also going to talk about municipalities and how it is that cooperative enterprise, farmers, community members can heal and grow food in urban areas, that I looked for Emilia-Romagna, which is a really big region north of Tuscany in Italy. And the global regional net is 157 billion euros or 189 billion dollars. We're talking about a cooperative system that has been thriving for a very long time. And I noticed when I was looking at my slide that there was this Democracy Collective. Wait a minute, Democracy Collective is the institute behind U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. So I went to the website and I found, oh, they're growing co-ops to scale. So there are those among us here in the United States that are working very, very hard to create the kind of interconnected, cooperative ways of being live and well, working together in an economy and in an ecology. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and I'll turn this over to my colleague, Paul Roger.
My name is Paul Roger. I'm a teacher at Merritt College in Oakland, and I'm also a co-founding member of Agroecology Commons that I'll get into a little bit later in my talk. But the first part of my talk, I wanted to highlight a book chapter on urban agroecology that will be published very shortly. It's in press right now. The book is in press. It was co-authored by a group of educators and nonprofit workers who basically put together the Bay Area Farmer Training. And I wanted to give a shout out to all of them before I begin talking about the actual program. Ana Galvez Martinez was the lead educator for the Bay Area Farmer Training from 2016 to 2018. Brooke Porter, it was when we wrote this chapter, just finishing up her master's in agroecology. Leah Atwood and Natalia Pinzon helped conceive of the Bay Area Farmer Training, and in the case of Leah, Leah helped.
Paul, can you please share your screen because we cannot see it in the video? Now it's okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it looks like it just switched over. I'm not sure what was going on. Leah Atwood and Natalia Pinzon were conceived of the program, and Leah also assisted in as an educator toward the end of the course. And we co-authored this article because we felt that it was important to share out lessons learned from training programs in agroecology that draw on popular education, holistic approaches to educating around agroecology and also in the urban space. So the Bay Area Farmer Training focused on urban farming practitioners who were interested in getting started in urban areas. My apologies for that sound in the background. I'm not going to be able to do anything about that. It's out of my control. But the program was unique in serving various groups of people that, according to the USDA, would be considered underserved.
The background noise is very loud.
It's very loud. I can try to move. My apologies. There's not much I can really do about it. I'm in an open space, and there's no real solution, unfortunately. Okay. Unless we want to pass the mic to Seth, I can try to relocate to somewhere that is quieter if it's too much of an annoyance. I don't want the audience to be affected. Seth, would you be willing to jump in?
Hello, this is Seth Wilson in Southern California, Riverside, California, and very grateful for the opportunity to share what we've been doing, what we call the Riverside Proof of Concept in agroecology food systems development, with the help of Theo and Paul and others really for the last 4 or 5 years. We have been focusing on how do we bring urban agriculture, agroecology practices into Southern California, an area of 22 million people. Let me pull up my slides real quick. Okay. Riverside Proof of Concept in local food shed resilience. Riverside's part of a region called the Inland Empire, which is the 13th largest metro area in the United States. It's the fastest growing area in California. Our largest employer is Amazon, which has 14 fulfillment centers, and which is more than the entire state of Texas. We live in a region with a 35% high school dropout rate, and 25% of adults have a college degree or better. 60% live in low-income, low-food access communities, and we have approximately 300,000 undocumented residents. So within this context, my background has been in energy risk management, in utilities, and in energy commodities and trading, primarily electricity and natural gas. But back during the last economic collapse, started to look at more systemic risk issues and structural risks, and became very intrigued by this food, water, energy, and nexus. And while a lot of attention is focused on energy and water, not much has been on food systems. And it turns out in Riverside, we have, I would say it's one of the earliest urban agriculture communities in the country. It was established in 1870 as a colony, and it had a very utopian viewpoint. The founder of Riverside, John Wesley North, said, "We wish to form a colony of intelligent, industrious, and enterprising people so that each one's industry will help us promote his neighbor's interest as well as his own." Riverside was the birthplace of Sunkist, a cooperative that was established in the late 1800s. And around the turn of the century, Riverside was the wealthiest per capita city in the country because of the second gold rush, which was really the growth of the navel orange, which was introduced in Riverside to the U.S. By 2 trees that were shipped from Brazil through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So canals and water infrastructure, everything was built in the late 1800s really to support agriculture. And we still have a 120-year-old canal, the Gage Canal, that feeds about 4,700 acres of greenbelt within the city. Riverside Agriculture, the county, is about $4 billion in the agricultural sector. And it's been recognized by the American Farmland Trust as a region that has high quality farmland, but is also under high development risk. While acreage for typical farmland sells for $8,000 an acre on average, areas of agriculture that's being torn out for subdivisions and warehouses is going for as much as $800,000 per acre. So that type of economic incentive makes it very difficult to sustain and maintain agriculture within the region. And at the same time, because of our current situation where we have 1/4 of our children receiving food assistance, there's a tremendous need for urban local agriculture to help address some of the food security issues. Key drivers that are affecting Inland Empire in Riverside has primarily been the growth in warehousing and distribution systems. And you can see from this slide, in 1998, in the upper left corner, you see Southern California. There's a dashed line that kind of separates LA County and Orange County to the left, with the Inland Empire of Riverside and San Bernardino counties to the right. And if you look at the comparison with the 2014 slide, these bubbles get larger, and those bubbles represent the number of warehouses and distribution centers that have grown over that 6-year period. What impact does that have on our region? Well, we're driven by global transportation and goods movement. 43% of all shipping containers entering the U.S. pass through the Los Angeles and Long Beach ports. And as they're offloaded onto trains and primarily trucks, heavy-duty trucks, shipped to distribution centers, those centers being more built out in the Inland Empire because of what one of our local economists calls cheap dirt, comparing land prices to LA and Orange County. We're seeing that 68% of total cancer risk in Southern California is really driven by diesel particulate matter from heavy-duty trucks and vehicles and equipment. We see tremendous opportunities for carbon farming just to avoid some of the cost of development. 1 acre of farmland in Riverside, California would produce 58 times less greenhouse gases than 1 acre of development. And so with Riverside, San Bernardino County being the fastest region for growth in California, it's important for us to be looking at ways to mitigate that type of growth and at the same time find ways of being more economically sustainable for our community, which has some of the lowest wages given warehouse employment and certain retail employment. Working mothers carrying 2 jobs, we think there's tremendous opportunities if we can transform some of that job focus to urban agricultural development and market gardening, subsistence farming are strategies that we're pursuing. We also see challenges in our current food distribution system where the Central Valley provides a tremendous amount of food to not only the rest of the U.S., but our major cities of San Francisco and Los Angeles. And if you look at that food transfer in the context of virtual groundwater and the amount of overdrafting that's occurring, they're exporting a tremendous amount of water in the form of food, which it really is not sustainable. And Riverside lives in the base of the largest water basin in Southern California, the Santa Ana River Basin, and has access to that basin and a number of groundwater basins that are much more sustainable. So the strategy of feeding 22 million people is if we can reduce some of the carrying capacity of the Central Valley and build economic development through sustainable agricultural, regenerative agricultural practices, that water is best used in those areas than trying to grow more and more communities of families that move to the Inland Empire that then have to commute 30 minutes to an hour back into LA and Orange counties every day to work. For the last 5 years, working with the city of Riverside, they initiated a Grow Riverside program, and every year we've been holding conferences on agriculture and opportunities for developing urban agriculture in Riverside. We worked with a consortium of 90 stakeholders throughout the Inland Empire to establish a food policy and action plan that was approved by the City Council in 2015. And at that time, in many cases, plans are just put on the shelf, but we formed Riverside Food Systems Alliance to really push that into action. And with the help of Paul and the team that he introduced in his short comments, Mesa came in and constructed some farmer training initiatives. And so Jarte de Valle in Oakland, California, and our Next Gen Farmer program here in Riverside were started in 2019. We're starting to have graduates there, and we're looking for new farmer startup opportunities. We think the opportunities are there for cooperative food system development through this process, whether that's producer cooperatives, farmer, producer, worker cooperatives, and then a variety of supporting cooperative structures in financial services, daycare, and housing that can support this initiative. Our first cooperative that we're focused on right now is a farmer landscape contractor model. And this is where the farmer cooperative actually is a California registered contractor for landscaping or foodscaping services. To reduce startup capital needs, the landowner will pay for a lot more of the upfront cost. We comply with California regulations, and we can actually start to bid for projects on urban greening contracts on public lands with that contractor's license. So it's a way of building community empowerment, building community wealth, and we see that we can, through this regenerative process, regenerate the agriculture that was initiated back in 150 years ago in Riverside. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Seth. In fact, that is a pretty good segue into my presentation. Seth and I collaborated on the training of farmer trainers that happened in Riverside. It built off of the Bay Area Farmer Training. Ana Galvez was the other lead educator on that program. So it actually ties in really well. And doing the training for people who were starting farmer training programs in Riverside was the first opportunity that we had to really be reflective of our own process and our own experience. So I'm going to go back to showing my screen now and briefly finish up our presentation here. Okay, so as I was saying, the Bay Area Farmer Training emphasized a couple key aspects in our the way we put our program together. We approached the program with humanistic values, meaning we thought about how issues in agroecology connect to commonly understood values, and this helped make the ideas that we were discussing relatable, and it also expanded out the way we were discussing agroecology to encompass social justice issues. We also borrowed a lot on popular educator theory, such as Paulo Freire and Pedagogy of the Oppressed and bell hooks. So we were leaning on many other writers and experienced people who have written about popular education, as well as looking at examples from La Via Campesina and our own personal experiences as educators. And then we emphasized liberatory and decolonial and feminist frameworks in our education. So that required us to be very aware of our social position, and me as a Euro descendant U.S. person had to be very aware of my my role in the class, and as a facilitator, how I engaged with students who came from very diverse perspectives. Right as of now, we've identified a few takeaways that are outlined in this chapter that we would recommend to trainers, people who are going into farmer training. So one important thing, especially in these current times with an increased awareness of oppression and police brutality, we need to have trainers who are actually receiving training in restorative justice, anti-oppression, and other conflict engagement. This is not only to say that we did things perfectly, but we actually learned a lot from our mistakes, and we did well, but we could have even done better. So that is a call to everybody who's engaged in farmer trainings that attempt to serve underserved groups. And then there's a real need to avoid alienating rhetoric and the constructs that we use, and to become too theoretical. It really can be a barrier to cross-cultural dialogue. So bringing terms down to concepts that people understand is really important. It's important to build trust through mutual understanding of struggle and shared leadership. So what we're saying here is that you know, when people identify with each other as part of the same struggle, it's much easier to build trust and even cultivate new leadership that's more horizontal in a training setting. And then this may seem simple, but in fact it's not so simple, that it's important to respect and appreciate students for the entirety of who they are, and to emphasize humanizing classroom practices, from how we open up our classes with check-ins to the ways that dialogue occurs between guest speakers and participants. And that builds into this issue with some guest speakers who we invite into our educational spaces not necessarily having the language or the frameworks, anti-oppression frameworks, to engage with people in a productive way. So one of the things we learned is how important it is to actually give the people we invite into our classroom spaces some guidance to understand who they're going to be teaching and what kind of material they've already covered, what kind of frameworks or activities might be helpful, what kind of language is considered inflammatory or inappropriate, and the kinds of ground rules that we as a community of learners and educators uphold. And then values-centered curriculum is very important, like I was mentioning earlier when I had to jump off the call. So thinking of basic things like, you know, I'm escaping, they're out there in my brain, but I can't draw it right now. I'm going to move on, but essentially applying values that we see showing up in our lives as being important, and then being able to connect those to agroecology can really help advance the curriculum. And then more for the organization as a whole, emotional, mental, and physical health is really critical, especially in demanding nonprofit programs where various issues kind of intersect and play off each other in an organization. And it's really important that people are in the organization felt taken care of and are addressing not only their work environment, but what's also happening outside of the work environment. And representative staff leadership is really amazingly important. I mean, there are so many ways that we struggled with this in the old organization Mesa, and we're trying to build in a more representative staffing in our new organization called Agroecology Commons. And finally, a lot of times these programs, such as this one, which was funded by the USDA, are written by the people who write the grants in a language that is understandable to the funding agency, but often that needs to be translated into metrics that are actually important for the work that we're trying to do in the world. And then lastly, as much participatory planning ahead of time before grants and funding get actually awarded is all the better. So, for example, having roundtables and calls with people who have important perspectives on the programming that you're trying to do, and then also considering things such as participatory budgeting with stakeholders and other partner organizations is very important. So now I'm going to speak briefly on Agroecology Commons. We're a group of 6 individuals. Tanama Varas, who's featured in this photo, is one of them. It also includes Will Smith, Geneva Kilgore, Brooke Porter, Leah Atwood, and myself. And this is our current framework that we're using for this new nonprofit, and I'll get into the structure of it because it actually relates to what Seth was saying. We wish to cultivate community action and global solidarity to decolonize the food system and promote agriculture rooted in relationships of reciprocity, rematriation, and racial justice. And to what, and as we do this, we're thinking very deeply about how to actually create an organization that reflects this in our structure. And so, as Seth was mentioning, the worker cooperative farm model is really appealing to us. And we're thinking now of actually maybe even having a branch that's a nonprofit that's geared toward social impact programming, and then a cooperative farm and other possibly community housing that could be more of a business model that's actually functioning. So what does this look like? This is one potential property we're considering. A land base is incredibly important. We need, one of the main goals we have as an organization is going to be to increase access to basic requirements for farming, which comes down ultimately to the land. And so this is one property. We're doing some design work around what a potential educational farm could look like, where there's both a nonprofit and a worker-owner cooperative at the same time, doing multiple activities on the same piece of land. And we also wish to have a strong youth education program where people can come and stay on the land in campsites, as well as tiny homes to learn while being on the land. So this is the projected layout that we might consider for this piece of land if all goes well. And we're currently negotiating with the landowners and seeking funds in order to acquire the property for Agroecology Commons. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. So at this point, Theo, I believe you had some ideas for how we could have a discussion. Is that right?
We have 10 minutes, more or less.
Yeah, I still can't see anything, but I can certainly hear you, and I so appreciate what you're presenting because, you know, both cooperative ownership on pieces of land, where you also have electronic educations facilities, your courses that you teach, and also validating, you know, some of the challenges that might have some innovation tags to them would be fantastic. And then also Seth speaks about the local food shed resilient program, which includes this contractor, landscaper, foodscaper, cooperative ownership model for diverse people in Riverside. Seth mentioned there are like 300,000 folks potentially, and a lot of local people that need nutrient-dense food and need, quote, jobs. But one of the things that's fabulous about the cooperative stream, if you will, the cooperative life path, is the fact that you are owners and that you can, do what you collectively want to do. And I'm just really grateful that Seth and Paul and others have participated in Riverside to such a degree that we have found some paths like this landscaper, foodscaper path. Seth, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about the kinds of land that you've been finding in the city of Riverside.
Yes, thanks, Theo. Yeah, Riverside has a tremendous amount of, and the region still has a tremendous amount of acreage in citrus, a lot of it in navel orange. And in many cases, those lands or properties are owned by multi-generation families that have been farming, but now as the senior owner ages out and the children have left for other communities and other jobs, the concern has been either developing that property for some other purpose or to let it go fallow, which causes a whole nother set of issues. In California, we're also battling the Asian citrus psyllid, and so it's very important to properly manage these lands. I'm very excited to hear about a lot of ground cover opportunities in citrus. We are looking to implement new changes to citriculture, if you will, that would help manage some of the pests, but also diversify the crop to multi-cropping and create really an environment that can support agroforestry, agroecology, and a variety of microbes and bugs. Soil building is going to be very critical in what we do. And while we have rich alluvial soils, it's been degraded through erosion and through the addition of pesticides and fertilizers. And so there's an opportunity to work with groundwater basin managers to help restore some of the water basins. And in doing so, every property is going to be different. And so how it plays itself out really depends on both the owner as well as the land itself. And that was the other great thing about learning from Paul and Anna in the Train the Trainer programs, is to bring that culture and social element into the contractor conversation. And I think when you look at historical agriculture, it has been predominantly professionally owned lands of lawyers and doctors, and farming was a second activity. It was more of a Jeffersonian approach. And here we have an opportunity, if we can restore those lands, create businesses that can own a piece of those operations through long-term leases, potentially lease purchases, into retaining and restoring those lands and utilizing the natural resources, ecosystem services that we think are greatly needed in this region to make sure we have a restorative region.
So two things. One, I'd like to go to Paul for a second, Seth, and then back to you. Paul, you've, with this new land that you and your cooperative members are looking at, the context of where you're located is in just these wonderful regional and state parks and wildlands. And one of the things that really sticks with me from the 2 days of Soil Not Oil, particularly the last one in which, just a minute, I'll get you his name. The last one in his farm in Costa Rica, Thomas Newmark was talking about the incredible fertility that was achieved through just incredible diversity of species. And so I'm wondering if you see being in connection with your larger public land, manager associates to basically learn more about that with reference to farming practices and agroecological regenerative resilience.
Thanks for that question, Theo. Yeah, I wanted to respond to your other comment as well earlier about the online education piece, which I didn't mention, but we have a desire within the nonprofit branch to have a farmer campus that's hosting courses such as the fires resilience course that some of my colleagues helped put on recently, and in terms of your question about land, the location of this land and potential collaborations with natural areas. There's definitely the current location that we're looking at is in Petaluma, which would provide a really helpful connector from our current land base in El Sobrante, so that people who start farming on a small scale in an urban setting in El Sobrante in the East Bay, and then move up to farming on a larger piece of land within a close distance of one another. The live feed is showing the 2-minute wrap-up comment. It's good. So that's the idea, is that people could move from urban centers into the rural areas gradually and gain more and more experience managing larger and larger pieces of land. And there's also the opportunity to collaborate with local watershed stewardship. And I think this is really important in the sense that often the overwintering sites for beneficial insects are in the riparian corridors of farms. And so it's very important to have good stewardship of those areas. I'm in conversation with the Sonoma Land Trust about possibilities of putting a conservation easement on the land for the areas that are riparian corridors, and those would connect to the regional parks that are nearby and the Petaluma River, which is not too far from this current location. But I think in general, even if we don't end up with this piece of land, Agroecology Commons wants to have a blended kind of model for farming where natural stewardship, social justice, and organic and regenerative farming practices are all interlinked.
Yeah, I want to echo a point that Paul just made. Working with your water agencies, they have to put in urban integrated water management plans. City councils have to, and county organizations, governance have to put in their planning scenarios, environmental justice. And if we truly want to make a difference in California and apply regenerative agriculture, we have to look at how we make codes and planning processes compatible with the directions of regenerative agriculture.
Great. I think that's a great place to end. And I, for one, want to thank Miguel and Aaron and Mark and everyone on the team who constantly makes this one of the most exciting events in the year. And the fact that this is our first chance to be virtual. Not me, I'm over here. I didn't figure out how to do it. But nonetheless, have a chance to really listen to some of the most important voices in the world and have the opportunity of cross-pollinating and connecting among ourselves. So thank you.
Thanks to everybody, and I think we're done with our panel. Okay.
Yes.
Paul, instead, this is amazing, everything you are doing in California. I am really glad that we have worked together for many years, and that in somehow I feel part of this because I testify or I witnessed everything since the beginning, you know, in El Sobrante and also with killing living systems.